Celtics Nation, settle in, because a lot went down on that court tonight, and what looked like another complicated outing turned into one of those games that completely shifts the energy of both the team and the crowd. From the very first possessions, you could feel that the atmosphere inside the arena was heavy, almost as if every trip down the floor was a small test of endurance. The team came in carrying the weight of recent performances that left fans uneasy, especially with the recurring struggle to close out games. And when that kind of memory is still fresh, even the simplest mistake feels like the start of a disaster. But this time the story unfolded differently. The opponent arrived buzzing with confidence, playing like they believed they'd control the rhythm from the first minute to the last, and for a few stretches it really looked like that would be the script of the night. Still, Boston refused to let the game slip. Even when nothing was falling, even when every shot seemed heavier than it should have been, the team stayed composed, and that changed the entire direction of the matchup. The first quarter felt like a patience drill. It was as if the rim had shrunk. The team created good actions, found clean looks, but the ball simply would not fall. There was even that surreal sequence where a corner shot on the left misses, then the sprint along the baseline to try again from the right side, the offensive rebound that leads to yet another open attempt, and still nothing. 3 clean opportunities, 3 misses, and on the very next play the opponent races down and dunks without mercy. That is the kind of sequence that gets into a player's head, making it feel like every ounce of effort is being wasted. Yet even then, Boston didn't wobble. The opponent opened up a lead, pushed it into double digits, but never turned it into dominance. The scoreboard showed a gap, but the pulse of the game told a very different story. Everything changed in the second quarter. Baylor's entrance completely shifted the energy. First came that corner shot on the left that finally dropped, like cracking open a barrier that had been holding the team back. Then came that spinning jumper in the paint, a move that looked almost borrowed from another teammate's style. But the real spark was a pure grit play right near midcourt. Boston forces a turnover, the ball pops loose, and Baylor throws himself to the ground, twists backward, and somehow whips an improbable pass while still sliding across the floor. It was one of those instinctive hustle plays that sum up exactly what a team needs when a game feels stuck. The crowd recognized it instantly. The noise rose in a different way, as if that single act of effort had lit a fuse that had been waiting to ignite. Not long after, another moment flipped the temperature in the arena. A missed 3, the opponent pushing the pace, their guard ready to attack the rim. And suddenly Derek appears from nowhere, sprinting like he's moving without any weight on his body. That long, sharp, aggressive stride only he has. He reaches at the perfect instant and strips the ball as if it were the easiest steal of his life. He spins immediately, lifts his head, and launches the perfect pass for a score on the other end. Even with a little stumble midair, almost like the ball found the basket on its own. That was the moment the arena completely detonated. The noise felt like the team had just hit some emotional turning point. It was impossible not to feel the shift. And that shift was exactly what the coach talked about after the game. He didn't focus on execution. He chose another word: resolve. The team was coming off 2 frustrating nights, a bitter loss and a victory that felt like a loss because of how it ended. It is so easy to drag that emotional baggage from one game to the next. But this time Boston confronted the adversity head-on. The first quarter was rough, slow, almost irritating, but there was no panic. The second quarter was carried by contributions from players who usually don't get the spotlight, and it changed everything. Role players stepping up, altering the tempo, igniting the crowd, injecting energy back into the team. Even before any of the major plays in the second half, Derek's energy had clearly shifted. The broadcast even mentioned he wasn't letting offensive frustration influence his defense. They had no idea what was coming. You could see in his face that this wouldn't be just another night. The persistence, the defensive reads, the all-effort sequences, everything hinted that he was building towards something bigger. And when a team needs it most, that is exactly the kind of presence that separates a silent loss from a momentum-changing win. That mindset of resistance was essential because Boston wasn't winning the small battles. They were losing in the rebounding game, losing on second chances, losing in the paint, losing at the free throw line. It was the type of contest where you look at everything that is going wrong and wonder, how are we still in this? The answer was in the defense, in collective effort, and in the patience to wait for the offense to finally come alive. The crowd felt that and responded with full force. Every dive to the floor, every unexpected steal, every contested shot, everything turned into noise. It was as if the arena understood that winning this game would require something beyond talent. It required embracing discomfort. It required wanting it more than the other side. And that is what transformed a stalled start into a night that slowly took shape as a real comeback. The presence of the supporting cast kept the rhythm steady while the stars warmed up, and little by little the game turned into something entirely different from what it looked like in those opening minutes. Celtics Nation, what unfolded in the second half felt like a team stepping into a completely different version of itself, almost as if someone had flipped an invisible switch that changed the intensity in an instant. The third quarter began with a tension no one in the arena could ignore, because even with the emotional swing from the second period, nothing was guaranteed. The game was still hanging by a thread, and any empty possession, any defensive lapse could easily hand the rhythm right back to the opponent. But the Celtics came out with an attitude that made it clear they weren't willing to give an inch. The ball started moving with a different kind of purpose, not rushed, not hesitant, but firm and intentional, almost as if the team had finally remembered the blueprint they were supposed to follow all along. You could see the spacing improve, the cuts grow sharper, the passes hit their targets, and that alone shifted the entire energy inside the arena. Derek set the tone immediately. Even without having a perfect offensive night, he seemed determined to influence every single action the opponent tried to run, and that became obvious during a sequence that practically redefined the pace of the game. First came the block in transition, an instant read at midcourt that completely shut down a promising attack on the other end. Then, on the very next possession, he dove into the paint anticipating a pass that looked safe, ripping the ball away as if he had seen the play 2 seconds before it happened. Every player on the floor felt that impact. The whole team adjusted, raised the defensive line, started contesting everything, and the opponent, who until that point looked comfortable, suddenly realized that every movement was going to require extra effort. And it was within that growing rhythm that Boston's stars truly began to shine. After a quieter first half, Jason started carving out his spots, first with that strong left-hand drive ending in a precise short jumper, then with his signature spin move that creates separation even when the defender is glued to his hip. The crowd reacted immediately, because when he slips into that mode, you can physically feel the tone of the game shift. Jalen followed right behind him. He found quick transition lanes, attacked the rim aggressively, drew important fouls, and strung together a sequence that forced the opposing coach to call an emergency timeout, trying to slow down the avalanche that was beginning to form. From that point on, the game entered a kind of controlled pressure atmosphere. It wasn't dominance, it wasn't a comfortable lead, but it was the sort of scenario where all the emotional rhythm sits in the hands of the team that believes more. And Boston clearly believed more. The opponent still found the occasional jumper, especially in isolation sets, but nothing was enough to break the momentum the Celtics were carrying. Every defensive stop boosted confidence. Every smart offensive read reinforced the idea that this comeback wasn't luck, it was consequence. Then came the sequence that truly set the arena on fire. On a long opponent possession, after 3 frustrated attempts to attack the paint, Boston's defense forced a heavily contested shot that clanged off the rim and bounced high. Kristaps timed his jump perfectly, ripped down the rebound with authority, and before the ball even fully settled in his hands, fired an outlet pass to Derek. He caught it still in the backcourt, accelerated like a rocket, and even with 2 defenders trying to cut off his path, he covered the entire floor with those long, almost unnatural strides he has at full speed. At the last second, when everyone expected a contested layup, he whipped a cross-court pass to the corner, finding Sam completely free. The ball left his hands like a promise and dropped cleanly through the net, detonating a roar that felt like it shifted the air inside the building. From that moment on, the game moved into a phase where energy didn't just change the mood, it began influencing decisions. The opponents started forcing jumpers they hadn't tried all night, rushed into transitions that clearly weren't set up properly, and Boston read everything with clinical precision. That was when the coach sent Al back in, and his experience became crucial. Even without stuffing the stat sheet, he organized the defense, adjusted the positioning of the perimeter players, and provided exactly the kind of steadiness the team needed to keep the moment from slipping. The possessions became smarter, the offensive tempo steadier, and the game took on the weight that only mature teams know how to handle. The fourth quarter opened with Boston holding emotional control, but still needing to translate that into scoreboard control. The lead was there, but small enough that any slip could put the opponent right back into contention. And that detail seemed to sharpen the team's focus. Joe Mazzulla kept the more physical lineup on the floor for a stretch, betting that the wear and tear on the other side was going to catch up. And it did. Every cut began to find a slower defender. Every switch created a bigger gap, and Boston started exploiting that with intelligence. It was during this stretch that Drew stepped into a silent but massive form of leadership. He didn't force anything, didn't hunt highlight plays. He simply commanded each possession with the calmness of someone who has lived through hundreds of moments like this. On one play, seeing the opposing center delayed in recovery, he slipped into the paint, drew two defenders, and delivered the perfect pass to Kristaps for a soft finish. On the next, reading that the defender was flirting with a double team, he executed that short, controlled jumper that cuts momentum like a blade. Everything he did seemed designed for a single goal: slow the game down and tighten Boston's grip on control. The crowd sensed that quiet mastery and adjusted its own energy. The chants became more deliberate, more synchronized, as if everyone understood this was a moment of intelligence, not chaos. But emotion doesn't stay quiet for long. It returned with force when Jalen jumped a passing lane at midcourt, sprinted alone, and hammered down a dunk that shook the entire arena. It felt like a declaration. This game wasn't slipping away. The intensity rose once more, and Boston pushed the opponent into mistake after mistake. The other team tried responding with mid-range jumpers and a few desperate drives, but Boston's defense was so cohesive it looked like they were predicting choices before they happened. Derek returned to the floor with the same absurd energy from the second quarter, slicing through passing lanes, contesting every shot as if fatigue didn't exist. At one point, he nearly picked off a cross-court pass that could have led to an important basket, and even though he didn't get the steal, he forced an error that turned into Boston's ball moments later. Those kinds of plays, repeated over the quarter, slowly dismantled the opponent's rhythm. With the clock ticking down, Boston began managing the game with maturity. The ball shifted more through Jason and Drew. The offense became more methodical, and each possession carried a clear message: we're not giving you anything. Drives became more selective, shots more thoughtful, and even when the ball didn't fall, transition defense remained flawless, denying the opponent any easy outlets. The game transformed into a duel of execution, and at that stage of the night, Boston just looked more prepared. But before we continue, please remember to subscribe to the channel and give the video a like. Your support helps us keep bringing you the latest news about the Boston Celtics. Feel free to share your thoughts on the news in the comments as well. The news hit the league like a sudden, frigid draft sweeping through the venerable rafters of the TD Garden. Joe Mazzulla is out. Multiple sources close to the Boston Celtics hierarchy have confirmed the bombshell dismissal, a move so abrupt and ruthless it has stunned front offices and pundits across the NBA landscape. While the Celtics remain officially tight-lipped, only confirming a change in direction to key personnel, the internal chatter suggests a far more dramatic narrative. This wasn't a gentle parting of ways. This was a mandate from the top, delivered with an almost panicked urgency. The dismissal reportedly stems from a deep-seated dissatisfaction within the ownership and upper management regarding the team's perceived lack of killer instinct and inability to consistently translate overwhelming regular season talent into the necessary, grinding dominance expected of a championship contender. The whispers suggest that key figures felt the coaching leadership had failed to instill the psychological edge required for a deep playoff run. The term imbalance has been thrown around, a reference to a style of play deemed too reliant on individual brilliance and not enough on the disciplined, suffocating team defense that has historically defined Boston's most successful eras. What makes this rumor particularly potent is the unprecedented demand attached to it, the mandate for an immediate, tangible turnaround. This isn't just a new coach arriving. It's a call for a complete psychological reboot of the roster. The pressure on the remaining staff and the incoming, as-yet unnamed replacement is immense. The front office is apparently operating on the belief that the current core, a championship-caliber roster on paper, has been underachieving based on coaching decisions and a system that failed to maximize its defensive potential in high-stakes moments. The sheer timing of the move is also telling. It speaks to a leadership group unwilling to tolerate even a hint of slippage, demanding perfection and accountability with a heavy hand. Names are already circulating wildly through the NBA grapevine. Veteran coaches with proven track records for instilling discipline and defensive structure are the primary focus. This is a high-stakes gamble by the Celtics brass, a clear signal that anything less than a title-contending trajectory will simply not be tolerated. The Green Machine is now running on fumes of rumor and raw expectation, waiting for its next architect to step into one of the league's most demanding spotlights. The silence from Boston is deafening, but the implication is crystal clear. The time for excuses is over. The pressure cooker just exploded. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to keep receiving exclusive news about the Boston Celtics, please subscribe to our channel and give the video a like. We always appreciate your comments and opinions. See you in the next video.